Hello, my name's Jason Skill and welcome to my studio. Most of us will have our favourite largest brush. Mine's this one. It's a mixture brush made by Rosemary and Co. and I use it all the time. I love the fact that it's got great bounce, great carrying capacity, and it's a brush that I can recommend to my students because it's inexpensive. Now, if I was to recommend a sable brush of the same size, a number of my students would not be able to afford it. So the mixture brush really fits the bill for this. But for those who love sable, the larger the brush, the more expensive the item. So when you're talking a size 24 sable, you're talking big money. But let's have a look at how big a size 24 sable actually is. What I've done here is I'm just putting down now my size 12 next to pound coins. This is my large wash brush that I have made, and this is the size 24. Look at the difference in the length as well as the width of the 12 to the 24. Now, I've really no idea how much this would actually cost to make now. To buy, I should imagine it's well out in excess of £500. So is it worth it? Well, I suppose you've got to ask yourself, is a Rolls Royce worth it? Is a Ferrari worth it? Do you need a Rolls Royce? Do you need a Ferrari? No. Is it lovely to own one? I'm sure it is. I do not have that privilege. And the same's true of something like this. This is an absolute delight to use. I don't use it all the time because the scale that you're working it doesn't necessarily fit. And I can show you what it would be like to work at this scale with the brush. But it really starts to come into its own when you're working on a full sheet or you're working double elephant. So double elephant is twice as big as a full sheet. Then you can have sweeps of the brush, you can make some wonderful dramatic marks, and the scale is related beautifully to the size of the paper. So why would you put all this money into such a beautiful brush? Well, because like if you're perhaps a professional guitarist, you may think I deserve a high quality guitar to make the sound better. And it was the same sort of thing, I suppose, with a wonderful implement like this. So let's have a look at it in action. Let's put a little bit of colour. I put a little bit of colour here into my palette. Now you're going to need a reasonable sized palette for this because it's going to be too big for your sort of small scale palette. This is one of my own palettes. So here I'm just going to pick up some Prussian blue, and you can see that the amount of paint that this would carry would easily cover this whole sheet. But let's not do that. That would just be me covering a piece of paper. That's not very interesting. Let's have a look at if it can still do some tiny thin marks. Now remember, this is 25 years old, okay? And although I don't use it a great deal, it hasn't got the utterly fine point that it had when it first came. But let's just take the excess off and we'll try holding it on its tip. And yes, it's pretty impressive as to how tiny this brush could go. So we could, let's have a mix of it, say with some brown. And we could probably do a wonderful full brush mark, say for a tree trunk, and then come out and do some to the smaller marks with great ease, going from large full fat, shall we say, to a much finer thinner mark with no particular hassle to the process. Wonderful. Let's have a look what it looks like when I splay the marks. When I say splay, I mean I take the brush hair and I widen it and break the end of it. So let's have a look at me doing that. Take the brush and I take the excess of the weight of the brush off and I open it out to the point where it becomes wide and much of the moisture is gone. So now, yes, it can do wonderful printing marks. And let's push it down again. And I could do some rather, let's think we're going to do some bushes, some fine drag marks. turning them vertically, making a lovely variation. So let's just put some thin little marks that would lead up into that, using its fine pointability. I could also control its tonal value, beefing up the brush contents, making it much stronger, much heavier, and then going back in and perhaps beefing up the amount of paint that I would put into the previously painted areas. It does take some getting used to because it's so huge, but it is a delight to use for a larger brush. So if you're in the kind of Rolls-Royce market and, you know, money doesn't matter to you, then this is going to be, you know, this sort of size of brush, perhaps a 20, might be a wonderful thing to own. For the rest of us, it might be something that we just dream about having. I used to carry it round and use it, but I found my students kept saying, "Ooh, can I have a go?" And at the end I thought, well, no, actually it's such a, you know, expensive item. I really need to take it and just keep it in for my own studio use, which is why it kind of went out of general service, and I've kept it for more special use for larger scale paintings. I found it particularly fantastic when I was painting seascapes at 8 feet by 4. I did a whole series of paintings where I was doing some massive wet in wet seascape paintings, and it was a joy to use in that context. So at the time I was working for Rosemary, I was a demonstrator in the northeast of England, and I was really interested in old master artworks. So for Rosemary, I was doing some demonstration work in museums, and I was showing all the different brushes that you could use, which you could apply to doing some painting on, you know, illustrating differences and detail. I was also experimenting painting outside, doing some demonstration work outside. I was exploring the seascape painting that eventually went up to 8 feet by 4. And I was also doing some demonstration work. This particular one was created using a small curved dabber brush that they had developed. And I was showing how you could use that one brush, apart from the initial wetting of the surface, to paint this entire woodland scene. I created this from imagination, just using the that particular brush. Let's have a look at a little bit closer in at some of the lovely marks that it could create. So explore that catalogue, you know, and think about using perhaps more than just your basic round pointy brush, and you might find that there's a whole host of new marks that you could make. And I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this simply massive brush. And if you win the lottery this weekend, maybe it's something to consider. My name's Jason Skill, and I have educational videos which you can explore and on my website Studio. I hope you'll visit that and enjoy your day. Bye.